So my name is Peter Askim. I'm the artistic director of the Next Festival of Emerging Artists, and this is a festival that started 8 years ago, designed for early career musicians to give them all of the pieces of the puzzle. What does it take to make a career? So artistic coaching, collaborations, work with great guest artists, um, entrepreneurial thinking. And so when the pandemic hit, we decided that we wanted to step right in and try and provide these resources to all of you for free. So we're really glad that you're here, and we're doing all of this as a service to our community of artists and audiences and students. If you're able to help at all, I'll put in the chat a link to make a donation. Every little bit is appreciated, and we're excited to keep bringing you great artists. I'm really excited to announce that we're planning a festival now, an online festival for our students and alumni. Details to come, but we've got some great names already lined up. We will be continuing to make lots of events free for the public all the way through the end of June. And stay tuned. You'll be finding out lots more about that. We have great programs coming up next week as well. Matt Heimovitz is doing a masterclass. Lisa Bialava is doing an amazing project called Broadcast from Home, and she's going to be here next Thursday to talk about that. Jennifer Coe is doing a masterclass the week after. So since we're all here to talk to Tracy, I want to hand it over to her, but I would just want to tell you that she and I are old friends, and it's been interesting to follow her journey as she follows the festival journey. Both of us were starting something at roughly the same time, and it's been great to see her podcast, Crushing Classical, really blossom and really become a major force. If you listen to her, you know how great it is. If you don't, you should, and you will. She also started a great ensemble called the Contempo Ensemble, and doing some really innovative things. And I'm excited for her to be here and for her to share all of her ideas with you. And thanks for tuning in. I'll be back later. We'll be taking questions. You can put questions in the chat. Tracy will check from every once in a while, and also be watching the chat. Happy to have you all here. Tracy, thanks so much.
Hey guys, thanks for coming today. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the concept of visibility and growing your audience online. So how many of you feel super totally comfortable just posting on, so like, put your hand up if you're like, I love social media, it's awesome. Oh, we got one. Sweet. Okay, so you're like, is that like a halfway? Is it like a so-so kind of thing? Good. Okay, then you're in the right place. That's awesome. Because really, as you guys all know, the career landscape is like drastically changed basically overnight. And so I want to talk about that today. But first, I want to talk about sort of the whole concept of becoming visible and how, like, the pieces of the puzzle to grow your audience online and why that's important. So essentially, the thing about classical music that you like everybody here knows is that there are inherently some limitations with the career, right? Because in order to succeed and make it in the world, you have to be chosen. Somebody has to say, hey, come do this gig, or you won the job after 3, 4, 5 rounds of a day's long worth of auditions after tons of preparation. That could be your first, unlikely, probably your 5th, 10th, 40th audition sometimes. It's not easy to be chosen, and you often have to wait to be chosen. So that's my story, essentially. I know it's a lot of classical musician stories, but that's where I wanted to start today, because really, I think it's a mistake to wait to be chosen, but it's sort of baked into our education that that's what has to happen. So I'm a horn player. I started my career in Chicago, basically. After undergrad, I moved back to Chicago. I'm from the area. I moved into the city, and I started to break into the freelance scene. And like, what I really wanted was a job at an orchestra. I mean, that was the big dream. But also, I was in a big city, and I was in a master's program, and I was like, well, I want to break in, you know, because who doesn't want the best gigs in the city, and who doesn't want to make money doing the thing that we trained to do. So I wanted to do that too. So I simultaneously wanted these two things, both of which I needed to be chosen for. So I started the audition path, and I also was freelancing and eventually worked my way up in the ranks in the city, had some of the best gigs that I could possibly get. And yet still I sort of felt like I wasn't living my real life, you know, because the real life would be a job. The real life would be, I was chosen to play in an orchestra. So I did eventually audition and win a job, but it wasn't a huge job. It was a job that paid around $20,000. That's before taxes. And so I felt like that wasn't still my real life. I still felt, okay, I made a step in the right direction, but this still isn't what I want to do. So then I ended up moving back to Chicago, back in the freelance scene. Then I went to China. I played a few months in an orchestra there. I came back and I was ready to hit the audition track again. And I did that again. And I ended up getting runner-up for a job in an orchestra here in Raleigh, North Carolina, for fourth horn. And I was the runner-up. So that was still not quite chosen, sort of chosen, like you almost got chosen. So they asked me to move there and play assistant utilities. So I did that, and it was definitely a step up. It was regular income as a horn player, which is what I thought like the pinnacle was for me. And it was like a big accomplishment, and I was making regular money. But at a certain point, I really felt like, okay, so is that it? Like I went back on the audition track a couple of times, seeking out that title, you know, because the title is really what everybody wants. And I came close, but yet I started to actually like where I lived. And so this was like a situation where I was like, am I allowed to like where I live and decide? So I decided to stay essentially. And because I was tired of the audition path, and also I started a family. So at this point it was around 2010, 2011. But I was still doing the same thing. And I got to the point in my career, once my daughter was a little older and I could focus back on my career again, motherhood wasn't taking up 99.9% of my time anymore. I started to think about my career again, and I felt like this isn't all I want. I want more than this, but what is that? And so that's the kind of the career crossroads that I came to. That was about 2016. So at that time, I started to research online, like what are people doing if they don't go the teacher route and they don't go the orchestra route, or like either as a job or a freelancer, is there anything else? And I was really like, I didn't think there was. I had my blinders on. I thought there was only like basically two ways to have a career in classical music. So I started to research and look around online, and what I discovered was that there were a whole bunch of people doing alternative things. They were starting their own chamber music ensembles. Some were even starting their own orchestras. They had decided to choose themselves and be soloists even in some cases. And so, and there were teachers, there were all kinds of different alternative things that were happening out there. So that was when I said, what would it be like if I started a podcast? I really want to get to the bottom of what is going on in these people's minds to say, oh, there's another alternative route that you can do. And so I decided to start a podcast. At this time in my life, I had just been reconnected with a good friend of mine who we were friends in youth orchestra, and in like 15 years old. And she ended up, we kept in touch sort of through college. But this was like, I'm old, so this was like emails just invented, but nobody really used it. So like people just went their own ways and then came back eventually someday if they got back in the same town. It was like not today by any stretch of the means. So anyway, we got back into touch, and she had quit the clarinet completely, and she'd gone into the business world, and she had started several businesses. She was now a coach, a business coach. And so she tells me that, oh, there's this like way of having a business online, and you grow an audience and then you offer them something. And I was like, well, I don't even know what that means. But but I was at the beginning, and she was sort of explaining it to me in real time. I ended up working with her for a little while, and I decided to start a Facebook page under, her suggestion, because she's like, "Do you have opinions about this career?" I'm like, "I'm full of opinions." She's like, "It's time to share them. It's time to start talking about this stuff publicly." So this was where I was confronted with sharing my own opinion on things that maybe people might disagree with me about online. My point of view on how the orchestra world works, my point of view on how the orchestra business is run, things like that. And I started posting about my life, and I started to post about what it was like to be the runner-up and take this job that wasn't really a job, and how that felt, and is this my career, or did I want something else? And I was just like laying it all out there, and it was really uncomfortable at times. But I started to do it at the same time I started my podcast. And so I started to interview people and really realize a whole bunch of things about people that were starting unique things in classical music. So I want to share with you like the 3 most common things. I kind of scrolled through my list of guests that I've had. I've interviewed over 100 people by now. And I wanted to sort of extract, like, what are some of the big things that people have, like some of the big qualities that they have for going on your own path. Because let's be clear, if you decide to go another route that's not like waiting to be picked, and you pick yourself, well, that means you have to make stuff happen, right? So it's a little more challenging in a lot of ways, but the pros on that is that you have freedom, you can make things happen yourself. But there are some things that I discovered when looking through, and I want to tell you about them. So one of the first things I noticed is that they all created a container for what they do. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the talk. But by creating a container, what I mean is you invite people into your world, essentially, and you say, here's what happens here. Like, I'm the leader, essentially, and you guys, my audience, are invited. And what happens here is this amazing thing. And it has this, and this in it. And here's why I think you're gonna love it. And that's kind of how you attract the audience to you. So you're creating something for them, but you're guiding them in what that is. Like, so let me give you an example. This is my favorite example from all my podcast episodes. And shockingly, it's not even in one of the top 10 slots of most popular downloads. But for me, it was my most favorite podcast that I ever did. It's this guy named Murray Hittery. He has a concert series called Mind Travel. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. If you have heard of it, say yes in the chat if you've heard of it, because I want to know if anyone else has heard of this guy. He's so awesome. So he creates these meditative concerts. First of all, the music is entirely improvised on piano. He's a composer and pianist. His story is remarkable. He graduated from music school as a composer, left music after school. He had this moment where he was like, how am I going to make money? How is this going to work? And it was the 90s, and it was the tech boom, and his brother was in tech. So he decided to partner up with his brother and start a business. But continued to practice, continued to be drawn to being a creator, but at the same time, he was doing this other thing. And I'm not going to give away the story because it's such a good episode. I want you to hear the story, but essentially what happened is that he turned to his music as a healing mechanism for a tragedy that happened in his life. And he wanted other people to have, like, he used it to really heal something very tragic in his life. And what he wanted to create for his audience was a healing experience. So essentially, he created the container for what I do is a healing experience for my audience. So if that, hopefully that makes sense to you. So like, if he just showed up and was like, hey, I'm a dude, I play piano, people can hear it or not, or whatever, then that's not the container. But the container he's created is, I'm creating a meditative experience for you. For me, it was extraordinarily healing. Here's how I make it healing. He even talks about like the harmonies that he takes from Eastern philosophy, like Eastern harmony traditions and things like that. So like he really, in a detailed way, create, and so you can see how it's like, wow, this is really well thought out. Not only that, like he's really created something unique that stands out in the marketplace, and it's also there for people for a specific reason. On top of that, he does these concerts on the beach, outside. People wear Bluetooth headsets and they experience it while being in nature. So as a performer, someone who wants to create something completely unique and extra, like you can see that what he did was he created the container for that. So another example is a guy, and this is the second, actually this next example, he's sort of in both categories, but the next thing I noticed that people that I interviewed had in common were they think big. Like they really think big. They think outside the box. They're not shoved down by people's opinions about what's possible. And this is a good example of that, you guys. This guy is named Hunter Nowak. He is a pianist who decided to take a 9-foot Steinway outside and play it in nature. And again, Bluetooth headsets, because, you know, if you're out somewhere in a field, you might not hear this piano. But if you listen to this episode, you'll hear, I asked him, like, what did you do when people said, ugh, are you crazy? First of all, 9-foot Steinway, how are you going to get that out there? Second of all, how can you put a beautiful instrument like that in the elements? Why are you doing that? Like so many like negative feedback from that. And thinking under the category of thinking big, as you're getting started on anything you want to do related to growing an audience, you really have to kind of put the blinders on and surround yourself with people who are supportive of you and people who are going to cheer you on and help you to continue to think big and stay on your course. Because, and which is hard to find, by the way, because when you talk with somebody, a lot of times, we're going to talk about this later about audience building, people think about everything through the filter of what is for them or what's possible for them. So if you say to somebody, I have this great idea, I'm going to take a 9-foot Steinway out to the Grand Canyon and we're going to play a concert. A lot of times the person talking to you is going to go, you're insane. How are you going to do that? I see so many problems with that. I see that this is going to be hard. This is going to be hard. This is going to be hard. And if you don't think big, if you don't have like your armor on, essentially, you're going to get holes poked in what you're doing. And it's going to deflate you and you're going to have second thoughts about what you want to create. And so that also happened to me numerous times as I was getting my podcast started. People would say to me, can you make money doing that? And I'd be like, I just started my podcast yesterday. I don't know. And I know the answer to these things now because 4 years later, I know what's up about that kind of stuff. But at the time when people ask you a question and maybe you don't know the answer to it, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. It can throw you off your game. I mean, raise your hand if you had somebody say to you about being a musician, oh, how are you gonna make money doing that, right? How are you gonna make money? Do people do that for a living, right? Exactly. So you've all had that experience, 100%. So it's the same thing. People are basically, they mean well, but they all, like, in the guise of meaning well, we just don't want you to get hurt. We don't want you to like make a mistake. Generally, they're doing that for reasons of being nice, but the truth is that it's bringing you down and poking holes in your idea. You need to surround yourself with people who will have conversations with you that are allow you to expand instead of contract. So the third common thing about all of these people is they execute. So they take their ideas and they take it into action in a really big way without giving up. So you can imagine how many different kind of problems Hunter had, and he talks about it on the podcast of, well, how do we get a 9-foot Steinway out into nature? Like, what are the logistics of that? And he kept at it, and they actually designed a way to do it. Like, it didn't exist. He had to create that. And so here's another example is somebody that I really enjoyed interviewing. His name is Steve Hackman. He's a composer and conductor, and he creates orchestra pop mashups. So he has like Brahms mixed with Radiohead. I think that's what the combination is. Brahms and Radiohead, Mozart and Coldplay. And he creates this like symphony essentially with parts. It's a mashup of all the things. And so like, generally, how do you sell that? This is continuing and executing regardless of what people are saying. Like, I'm sure he's been met with, and we talked about this too. Oh, that's cheesy. Why are you doing that? Or the musicians, I don't want to do this kind of crap. You know, like there's a lot of barriers as you move through your creation, especially if it is something that is not conventional, which a lot of times, if you're going on a new path that's not path A or path B, it is going to be unconventional. That's okay. And so that is what your audience is for. So we've arrived at like, what is the audience for anyway? And how do you gather those people around you for the thing that you're creating? So essentially, when you are creating something unique like this, your job is to, as an audience builder, you need to be the leader of the people that are gathering around you. And you also need to educate them on what you're doing and who you are and why you're there and all of that. So, for example, when I started in 2016, for me, an audience was the people in the seats at a concert. Like, and I don't know how they got there. Someone else did that work. And so now it was on me to bring people around me and create that awareness and conversation between us online. So I had to start figuring that out pretty quickly. So what I did was I started to share my thoughts and share my stories. And essentially over time, people started to engage with me. People started to have conversations. And that is what, like, that is the framework, essentially. That's the oversimplified example of what you do when you're starting something new, essentially. So let me know, I'm gonna take just a pause right here, and I wanna hear, do you guys have any questions about this whole concept of an alternative path in classical music? I'd love to hear from any of you about that, or like what you're thinking about any of the people I mentioned or anything. Anyone? You can say it in the chat, or if it's easier, just unmute yourself. No questions yet?
I am curious. I'm a composer, and I've been listening to a lot of big names in the industry about things that have to change about new music being produced today, and to adapt to the situation of COVID-19 and all of that. And I have a few ideas of my own as just how to sort of provide my own services as a composer, but I'm curious, like, if there's anything that you've heard of that, like specifically, like any cool ideas that you've heard from composers that specifically tackle the unique challenges that are happening right now to like collective music making? Like, how do we get around making music together, but also like at a safe distance?
Okay, so what have you had any ideas yet as you've been brainstorming this kind of stuff?
Almost everything has been leaning towards like flexible ensembles and things that are, well, flexible's the word. Making sure that like it's that you can get as much musical impact in every part with as few parts as possible.
Yes. So what if you were to start talking about that online and expressing your opinion and your stance on how important that is right now? I mean, I'll tell you a story.
Mm-hmm.
My husband is a violinist, and last weekend, one of our neighbors asked him to play some violin outside, just for some neighbors. And so he went on their front yard, and people in the neighborhood gathered and did their distancing stuff. And he played on the front yard, and it was so great. Everyone loved it so much. You know, what would it look like if you composed something where part of the experience was that there was, you know, a percussionist over here and, you know, another instrument 20 feet away over here, and it was actually built into the performance. And maybe
Gotcha.
it has to be amplified, but you know, I think if you're talking about right now, the only thing I see possible that can happen, and I think people would flock to it right now because they're so hungry for an experience, that if you said, like right now out my window, I can see a park that's that spans, like there's a road and then there's a park that spans like 300 acres. So like if you said, hey everyone, on Sunday, my performance of, you know, the Distant Symphony is happening. I know, don't use that name. Is happening in this giant park, and you know, people are allowed to go outside, and people are doing that at least in my city, and sitting down and having picnics, and they're allowed to have small gatherings. So what if that was happening, and the players were spaced out, and they could hear this and experience this thing? It would be something that would, I'm sure, 100% be snatched up in a second. So like where I would start is, hey guys, I had this idea. What do you think about it on my profile? Start a conversation.
Gotcha.
Your Facebook profile is one of the best places to start a conversation around your ideas and what other people think of them, because that's going to show up in your friend's feed. And if you ask something simple that they can easily answer, it's gonna take off. Like 2 examples of this that I did recently. One, I asked people, hey, who's on the struggle bus with practicing right now during this situation? And I had like 25 comments or more of people being like, oh, I haven't even picked up my instrument, or I have been, but I've taken on this project, and they just are sharing. And this is good information for me because of what I do, teaching audience building. If there's people in that thread that are like, I'm really thinking about creating a business online and I don't know where to start, then I would be like, hey, like, just so you know, I'm doing this thing and maybe you'd want to check it out. So it's a way to spark interest in, and just start a conversation and a communication around what it is that you do, but making it about them. So this is what it always is whenever you're growing an audience for anything, it's never about you. So I think a lot of people, when they start to grow an audience online, they go, oh, well, what am I going to tell about? What am I going to talk about? My breakfast and my dog, and I played the instrument today, and here's a video of me playing, and here's my dog again. And like, you can share parts of your life, of course. Like I share pictures of my poodle on Instagram stories and stuff, but mostly when you write a post, it's about what does the reader need from me right now? And how can I make sure that I'm seeing them and hearing what they need? So I see Celia has a question. Is there a process or any stories you can share about musicians getting recorded or self-producing an album? You know, actually, I had a friend of mine on the podcast, Shauna Tucker, who does this. And one of the things that she does amazingly is she grows an audience totally rooted in like who she is and her personality. Like she's 100% herself all the time, you know, online. And so what happens is when you are that, when who you're being is like yourself and your art and your work, this is for performing, is that people really get enrolled in what you're doing. They're like vibing with it. They're like, I want to know more. I want to be a part of that. Oh, you have an album coming out? Like actually how she started was she started doing events, like she started playing, this was a while ago, in a restaurant, and people were like, when are you creating an album? When is your album coming out? So she just started putting her music out there in live performance settings, and then people started asking her for an album. Like that's probably the best option. If you know people want your album, that's when you should make an album, in my opinion. I wouldn't want to make an album and then go, who wants it? Hello? I would want to be like, hey guys, you've been asking for it. It's finally here. Here it is. And that's the purpose of growing an audience, because you get to find out what your audience wants before you make the thing. So if you know you want if you want to know you want to make something, I said that too many times. If you know what you want to make or kind of what you want to create, a good idea is to start bouncing that off of people and saying like, here, I have this idea. What do you think of this? Or just putting your art out there and finding out exactly what they want. Also, Celia, oh, sorry. I just want to say this one more example. I don't know if you know about Esperanza Spalding, the jazz bassist. She's amazing. I always tell this story because it's so phenomenal. Obviously, massive audience, right? She's been doing the work of building that massive audience. We're going to talk about other people who've built really big audiences here in a little bit, but she's been building a really big audience for a long time. So she decided to self-produce an album. What did she do? She said, here's what's happening, guys. I am going to create an album over the weekend. I'm going to Facebook Live the entire thing. And then we're going to extract what we record from that and mix an album, and it's going to be for you. It's on sale now. It's pre-sale only. Only I think she sold 7,777 copies. Like that was the number she chose. And that's it. When they run out, it's gone. No more, it's gone. And that's a moment in time. You can never get this album again. And she's sold out. She's sold out. How awesome is that story? And so she invited them to have an experience with her. I tuned into some of those. I still kick myself for not buying an album. And if she ever does it again, I'm totally buying it. But she engaged with her audience, and she gave them an experience of being part of that whole entire recording process on Facebook Live for 3 days straight. And then she produced an album that was a snapshot of a moment in time. Like in the days of, in today's world of streaming, where I can turn on my phone and turn on Spotify and pick anything I want from anywhere. People want something different. I really believe they want something different. And so that is a perfect example of, I care about you as my audience, and I'm going to give you something else, something different. And then in the end, you're going to have something that nobody else can have. That's even better, right? Because if you have something that nobody else can have ever again, that's pretty much the best product ever. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh,
Daniel,
no.
what were you saying?
Part of my question, you just covered a lot, but two things you said that I hope you could follow up on. At one point, when you were talking about how to go about things, you said, you have to be the leader and you have to educate people. And then one thing you just said a bit ago that I thought was really important is, what does my audience need? What are some ways you've seen people do to find out what their audience, or I'm teaching in a small rural school in a rural state right now. My first year there was all about figuring out what my community needed.
Yeah.
So what are some ways you've seen people explore what their audience need as well as want, and then creating that experience?
That's such a good question. Thank you. Well, basically, it's a little bit of, it's like a two-part answer, because I think what I did was I saw a need. I'll just use myself as an example. What I saw in the marketplace was a need, and it wasn't necessarily that my audience knew they needed it until now, actually. But when I started, I started to talk about, we got to start thinking about careers differently, people. Look at all these examples. Look at all these people that I'm interviewing. They are showing you that this is possible. I'm not making it up. It's not invented by me, but here's the proof that there's lots of other people who are creating really cool projects and careers, and that stuff that you wish you had, recognition, acknowledgement, appreciation, those are all things that I was missing because I wasn't chosen in the way that I wanted to. And so there was that struggle there, you know, that I didn't have that. And so I was saying, oh my gosh, people, you don't have to wait for somebody to give you that. You can create it. Look at all these people, all these 100 people I've interviewed. And so I started there. You can create something different. And then as I built my own audience, I started to see that people were gathering around and they were being inspired and excited about the fact that there are other opportunities for them that they could create. And so then it's like the journey along this route that I've had creating the podcast and growing the audience, I realized, oh, I know how to grow an audience, and I know what this, because I was obsessed with it. How do I get the right people around me that want to know the things that I'm learning in real time? And then at a certain point, I was like, I know how to grow audiences, and this is amazing, and this is how you do it. And still at that point, I feel that there weren't a whole lot of people, it didn't seem like there were a whole lot of people who were like, oh man, I need an audience. But I started to share in sort of like free offers, like, here's what I can tell you about getting started. And then I created a program. And as I started to create programs for people to work with me, then during conversations around what their concerns were, what people wanted to know more about, that's how I found out what people needed. So I discovered, a lot of times you discover it through a conversation where someone's objecting against not working with you. They're like, actually, you know what? I don't want to do this now because I don't feel like it's the right time, or I don't feel like I know exactly what I want to say yet. And so like I would get an idea, oh wow, I would say there's something I can talk about here that maybe sort of this person said to me, but certainly a lot more people are thinking it. You know, and so it's really interesting to have these conversations or see these comments, like you get comments in your posts. So you basically, to find out what your audience needs, you have to start with maybe what you think they need, and then you get feedback and they tell you what they need. But it's definitely, part of it is showing up. A big part of it is showing up. And another part of it is having conversations and inviting people to have conversations. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Awesome. You can't be in here. Okay, sorry. Homeschooling. Bye-bye. I'll see you later.
And we got tons of stuff, $100.
Okay, bye.
Tons of peppers.
Okay, cool.
$5.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, Vicky, just asking them, you can't, like, that's what I suggested to Daniel a minute ago. Like, come on and go, hey guys, what do you think of this idea that I had? And when it's a good idea, you'll get a flood of answers. And I think it's a good idea already. So yeah, I love that question. Thank you so much. So let me answer Vicky's question. I've been so frustrated recently around the rhetoric of, if I don't make it as a musician, I guess I'll be a teacher instead. So amazing to know that there's another proactive option. And you know what? That is such a perfect segue into what I want to talk about next. So thank you for that. Yeah, you know, I think that's an outdated philosophy that people have said. And I know that My parents said it to me when I was a performance major, and they were like, well, why don't you just get an education minor so you can fall back on that or whatever. And like, I remember being really offended by that. Like, how can you tell me that I need a backup plan or whatever? And now I feel like you can actually have more than one thing. And when you grow your audience, that is the key. That is the golden key. So let me tell you, like, the rock star example of that. There's one of the associate concertmasters of the Los Angeles Philharmonic is named Nathan Cole. Do you guys know who that is? Nathan Cole, anyone? Yeah, some of you. So Nathan is a friend of mine from Chicago days, and then he moved to LA, had this job. Meanwhile, like, YouTube is invented and he jumps right on. He's an example of an early adopter, putting out content, growing an email list early on, like when people didn't even know what that was, he was doing it. Creating himself an audience on social media as a teacher. And and he was on my podcast too, by the way, so you could absolutely listen and hear his story. But his starting place was, you know, I have this position and a lot of people come out and they take lessons with me, and I repeat the same things over and over. I mean, anyone who teaches in here knows that, you know, you have a student, you're going to say the same things over and over. So he said, why don't I make some videos so that before they come all the way to LA to take a lesson, you know, watch these 3 or 4 videos. Now you're going to have like a good jumping off point for the lesson. So he did that. And then that kind of grew, and it was really a really gradual process. He didn't start by going, I want to create, you know, a 6-figure teaching business, but that's actually exactly what he did. Fast forward from, I don't know, 2008 when he started until now it's 2020. Starting last year, he launched a program called the Violin Virtuoso Master Course. And it was a 6-month program. And it was very highly profitable. It was a $5,000 program, which on one end sounds expensive. On the other side, if you're comparing it to university prices, that's pretty good. And he sold 20 spots. And then he repeated that and the program and raised the price, and I think sold even more spots. And now he's created a different kind of shorter program at a lower price point with a lot more people in it. So he's just tweaking the business model continually, but he is a top level orchestra performer as well as a thriving teacher in the online space. And so to create something like that in the online space is remarkable, and it's all rooted in, he's been showing up, contributing to his audience, finding out what they need and creating videos for that, growing his email list, and just continually building the audience bigger and bigger and bigger, so that when he puts something out there available for violinists, he has people to sell it to. So it's a really, really remarkable story, actually. And same with Lauren Pierce, who's a string bass player. Amazing, amazing. Like, if you watch her YouTube videos, you're like, is that a bass? That sounds so beautiful. And not to offend a bass player, but like, it's just so like nimble, you know, like so technically perfect and musical. And she did the same thing as Nathan. She and Nathan both coach with my business coach, Jennifer Rosenfeld, who helps people really structure these kind of huge teaching opportunity or teaching businesses, essentially. But to have results like that, you need to have the audience like that. So that's where I come in. I'm like, I want to help people build audiences so that they can have that kind of possibility in the future. And so what's really cool is that I actually worked with an oboe player named Janet, who I just interviewed today. I had a little Facebook Live with her on my Facebook page. And she worked with me last fall in one of my programs, and she launched her own online program. And yeah, it wasn't like the kind of numbers that Nathan had or Lauren as far as income, but she's been generating a significant 4 and 5 figure amount doing her oboe program that she designed. And so like, this is super possible as you grow. And Janet's been growing an audience for several years. And so the key is when you have people gathered around you who know what you do, who like you, who trust you, who can tell that what you're offering every day or every week for free online and giving them in their email box every day, you're giving value. You're giving an opportunity for them to learn from you without having to even pay for it. And then when there's an opportunity to pay, they go, oh my God, I can't even imagine how amazing it would be to go deeper with this person, knowing what they've already given me all along. So it's this new kind of way of thinking about businesses that's completely different from the way that things used to go. Like, I guess people used to sort of depend on, oh, I hope someone Googles me or finds my website, and then they'll find out that I teach, and then they'll call me. That's the same thing as waiting to be chosen for any of those other things. Whereas this is proactively building an audience, communicating with people who resonate with your message, and then eventually the goal is definitely to offer them something, because that's how you create a business. That's how you get paid. So a couple of tips. I want to give you guys a couple of like beginner, like if you want to start doing what I'm talking about for yourself, I want to give you a couple of like ways to think about this so that you can go forward and have some success. So one of the things that I want you to start thinking about is, and approaching social media, thinking of it as a marketer and not as a consumer. You know what? It's really dark in here. I'm gonna turn on the light really quick, but I'm tethered, so I have to pick up it. Okay, that's better. Got dark fast. So if you're a consumer and you show up on Facebook, you're gonna be annoyed maybe, and you might be like, I don't want to see this, I want to see that. I hate social media. People are annoying there. You know, like that's how I was before I started this. And how you can approach as a marketer is you're there because it's for your business. You're there because you want to find out what your audience wants to hear from you. So it's a different approach. So how you can control what you see is you can block people that you don't like their attitude, or people that are naysayers, like what I talked about before. Like if there's someone who comes on and says something rude to you, like I just thought of somebody who one time, like my podcast is called Crushing Classical. One time somebody came on and exactly what are we crushing here? Like some like negative comment. I'm like, bye, you can go away now. So like you can control the situation so that you don't have people who are bringing you down. That's the nice thing about social media. When you're approaching it as a business owner, you get to control what you're seeing. So, you know, what I like to do is select, there's this little thing when you follow a page, a business page or a friend, you can follow them or unfollow them. So you can unfollow people and still be their friend. You just never see their posts. Another thing to do with that is select that you see them first. So then when you go on Facebook, you're only seeing your favorite stuff that inspires you and motivates you first, instead of a random post that is going to make you feel like getting off the computer when you're supposed to be there doing market research or networking with people or posting on your page or sharing something relevant for your audience. So that's like the first tip that I tell people to do. It's pretty simple because it's just going to be something that makes you feel like, okay, I can show up here. I can do this. It's okay. And then another tip about that is to try and change your profile photo to a picture of your face. which I know a lot of people, most people have that, but sometimes people have like a picture of their dog or a picture of something not them or whatever. And so what you want to do is when people are meeting you for the first time, you want them to see your face. So the profile picture, that little round one, should be your face. And then the last thing I would say to do, if you don't have a business page yet on Facebook, go ahead and set that up. Just click set up a Facebook page and start inviting your friends to like the page. And you can, so I tell people that the page is like your storefront and your profile is like your home office. So your home office is like a place where sometimes people come in and learn about your business or have a conversation with you. But sometimes they show up at the storefront. So the storefront, you can feel like, oh yeah, here's everything related to my business. I don't really have to feel self-conscious about that. Sometimes the profile, you're like, I do want to share some other things. Maybe they're more personal, or like I had said earlier to Daniel, like you can just ask, hey guys, what do you think of this idea? That's like not so businessy. That's just like, hey, friends bouncing ideas off of friends. So it's more like that. Let me check the chat here really quick. Oh, Josh Lane with Harp Tuesday. Okay, I'll have to check that out, harptuesday.com. So does anybody have any questions about like having a business online, like a teaching business, and what that looks like, where you start, stuff like that? Are you guys interested in doing teaching or mostly performing? Tell me in the comments if you're like super just, I'm only a performer, I'm a teacher, I'm both. I'd love to see that.
We just got a question in the comments, Tracy.
Oh, Valerie? If you are really starting from scratch with building your visibility, is there any right platform to be growing your audience from? Podcast, blog? A colleague recently warned me against doing videos too early on if I haven't built up a core audience yet. I think that videos build up your core audience. So I have to respectfully disagree with that. I think you have to decide. Well, Valerie, can you want to tell me what you're up to? And you're a singer, so using my knowledge to coach. Okay. So what I would do is I like to start on Facebook because a lot of people are already there. And people use Instagram too. You might want to use YouTube because if you're going to do like a lot of tutorials, but generally you can start with one because, oh, I see Valerie. Hi. I like to tell people to start with one because if you say, oh, I'm going to be on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, then it's just going to be overwhelming and you're not going to want to do it. But what I like about Facebook is that everybody's there and it's connected to like, what's nice about it is that there's the friend and the business side kind of intermingling together. Whereas Instagram is like, it's all one thing. And they're two very different platforms. I use both. I use those two and I don't do any other ones. For a while, I humored myself that I would do Twitter and I feed and I hate it and I don't do it. And then with video, like I automatically send my podcast to YouTube and I think like a couple people watch it there, but I do nothing with the channel at all. So it's just kind of distilled down. And for a long time, I kind of resisted Instagram, but I've grown to love it for other reasons. But I would say start with one. And my 2 cents is Facebook first.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so, oh, Vicky's a life coach for musicians. All right, where are you posting? Instagram and Facebook?
Yeah, mostly on Instagram at the moment. I've just started a Facebook group for today, actually, for coaches, specifically coaching creatives.
Awesome. And it's a free Facebook group?
Yeah, free Facebook group.
What happens inside the group?
It's just, it was sort of, I mean, kind of on themes of what you were talking about, you know, things that I want to learn from and things that I know that other people are looking for as well. In terms of the coaching community, there are loads of ways that we coach creatives, you know, be they musicians or be they artists or dancers that are really similar, especially, you know, looking at self-doubt and things like that. So so it's really an opportunity for us to kind of share ideas, things that have worked for us, or, you know, things that are inspiring us. It's just kind of a, yeah, to
and you
knock
just
ideas
started it
about.
today?
Yes.
Okay, so can I give you some advice about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so with Facebook groups, here's the thing. People show up in them and they're like, what you gonna do in here?
Yeah,
That's what they do.
we've created. So I created a post. The first thing that they turn up in, I've got 20 members in the first day, and we've got a dialogue going already about, you know, what people's niches are and who they're coaching and how they've got to where they are. So it's already really interesting conversations happening.
That's great. So I would remember that you are the leader of the group and it's your job to start conversations, because anytime in a Facebook group people join, they go, oh, this is fun. It's a community. Yay. And then after a while it dies off, because those things don't continue to have momentum by themselves, just so you know. So generally, like, if you want to brainstorm that, since it's brand new, it's so cool, brainstorm, like, what do you want to have happen in there specifically? Not like, oh, it's a community for people to communicate and talk, and that'll happen if you lead it, but it won't happen by itself, and it will eventually get to this point where you're like, ugh. So you could say, like, in here on Tuesdays, I go live every week and I, you know, share some client stories, or I do hot seats with people and help them through their struggles or whatever. Like, you can set it up so that what happens in that group is that you help other coaches with that stuff, so that they show up and go, oh, Vicky is going to teach me something on Tuesday. I can't wait. Or I'm so excited that she's going to do like a mini coaching with me on Friday or whatever. Like, if you set up that kind of framework in advance, and you are always like putting out there the way that you want to start a conversation and the way that you want to create engagement, that's going to be a much more successful Facebook group. And the reason, like, hopefully that you have in mind that Facebook group is to generate warm leads for working with people later.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's hopefully exactly what I've started. You know, there's a post scheduled tomorrow morning, which is asking, you know, what people would like to see, or, you know, out of a few options that I've thought of already, what they're interested in specifically, and, you know, what else they might want from the group. So
that's a good idea. Yeah. So get their feedback for sure, and then decide, okay, now it's time for you to just follow my lead, because otherwise nobody will. Yeah. That's the thing about groups. And it's sort of the same thing about pages too. Like when you decide to grow an audience, you're deciding that you're a leader. And so you're saying, what happens here is we talk about this. And if you don't like it, you can bounce. So that's kind of like the idea, right? Like, this is my space, this is what we do, right? Go ahead.
Just in the way that you've done, you know, it's something that you were interested in and you want to know more about, and this is exactly it for me. You know, if it dies with me, then that means my interest died. I've gone somewhere else. So, you know, for as long as it's serving me, that's exactly where I want to be.
Awesome. That's great. I love it. Great. I hope your group turns out really well and keeps growing. It's awesome.
Thanks for your advice.
Yeah. So, Peter, are you asking about me or asking other people about?
I'm asking, you know, when you're talking about growing groups, I'm just very curious where everybody is listening in from, and what is helping with all of these talks that we're doing. Yeah, so that's just a general comment to everybody. We'd love to know who you are and what your experience is of this. And if you have good things to say, we're also collecting testimonials. We'd love to hear from you.
That's awesome. And I would love to, oh, I saw Benjamin's question. I'll answer that in a second. I just want to invite you all, and I just put the link in the chat. I am hosting a free challenge from June 1st to 5th, and it's called From On Stage to Online Empire. And so it's a way to jumpstart your audience in 5 days with super kind of targeted approach to get you up and running in 5 days. So I'd love for you guys to join and see you there. So all you have to do is sign up with your email on my email list, and I will email you back with a link to the Facebook group. It's going to be inside of a Facebook group. So I'd love to see you there. One more thing. Oh, Benjamin, as someone a little more hesitant about posting, one of my self-conscious fears is about post-media fatigue. Is that something that can be gauged or generally guided? Oh, generally like to get off of the computer, or I'm not exactly sure.
Sorry about, I guess to clarify, I wasn't sure how to word it exactly, but to mention, like, I'm running a crowdfunding campaign right now for an album, and but also in general, I always get really self-conscious about sort of like, oh, like, I've already sort of like posted something, and at the risk of sort of feeling like not wanting to, fatigue the audience, or
Fatigue
that
the
so
audience.
much stuff,
Oh.
or that they start seeing so many things that they start to just tune things out.
That's a good question. Okay, 2 things. Number one, everyone doesn't see every one of your posts. So I think the thing about social media, and the reason why email lists are so great, email lists are more intimate, and they're to one person, and it's like more of a, like, I'm on your email list because I really want to hear from you kind of thing. Whereas the feed can generally maybe not feel as like invited because it's the algorithm that puts that in front of your face. But just know that only like a fraction of the people that follow you are going to see any one post. So there's that. But the other piece of the puzzle to that is, why do they care about what you're doing, and why should they care? So like, that's part of always thinking about them instead of yourself. Like, I know that you want to raise money for your album, and that's totally fine. But what you need to tell them is why they will want to contribute to that. Like, what does it bring them? You know, like in the example of Esperanza Spalding, what it brought to them was like this super cool experience that they got to watch and be part of the entire time. So is the crowdfunding like one of those Kickstarter things where if you give this much money, you get the album plus some other bonuses? Is that how it works?
Yeah, there's sort of perks of basic album stuff. I'm sort of also sort of like at higher levels doing things like compiling like downloads of like other recordings of mine, offering like the scores, lessons, even like virtual like performances at a high enough level, and sort of also structuring like sort of benchmarks at a certain point of, after a certain like really small thing, like the, release like one track from the album. At its next part, we'll sort of like offer a live set. That's
cool.
Of similar material. Just
That's
finding
awesome.
ways to sort of, so you target to offering it, but not also just, not fatiguing with just sheer stuff or
just continue to be like, you should give money to my album. And the next post is, why don't you give money to my album? And then the next post is, hey, do you remember that I'm raising money for an album? Like, you don't want to keep doing it like that. But one of the things I would suggest is tell a story. Take people behind the scenes and show them how you're doing it. Or what's the inspiration for creating this? People love stories. People really love stories, especially if there's a unique, like there's been some stories I've shared, and it's great is that like it's always about them, and they can serve you because you get to tell a story that brings them to a point that you want to get to. So one of the best stories I ever shared with my audience was when I was launching my first program. I shared the story that when I was first starting out, I decided to write a book, and I hired an editor and I paid him a ton of money, like an embarrassing amount of money for like writing, coaching, and editing work. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I was trying to take a shortcut to build credibility and authority before I had done the work of creating authority and credibility on my own through showing up for my audience. And so what I did was I threw money at the problem, and it bit me in the butt later. And I had a major fail, and I didn't produce a book because it just wasn't right. The book wasn't right. Nothing about the whole situation was right. And so like, I didn't want to share that story for a really long time because I was embarrassed about it. But I ended up sharing the story, and I said to my audience at that moment, what I was trying to do was a mistake that I don't want you to make, which is to make something and put it out there and hope that people find it, when in reality, what you can do is build all this for yourself. You can build that credibility and that authority by showing up and attracting your audience in the slow way, essentially, but in the more authentic and the more the real way of doing it, which just happens to be what I'm teaching. And so it like, the story was interesting because I told more yucky details about it, and I even shared how much I spent, and it was embarrassing, and I told them I was embarrassed. So it was like, eeks, this is awkward, but I'm going to tell you this story. And like, if you tell somebody that, if you say, hey, I want to tell you something and it's really embarrassing and I'm almost afraid to tell you, aren't you going to go, what? Tell me, I want to know the story, right? Sorry, you had to pull that out? I was too loud. But that's what happened. And then people were interested. And honestly, that email, I sent that I told the story on a Facebook Live, and then I sent it in an email. And that email got a lot of opens, and a lot of people booked a call to find out more about my program. So when you share a story that is relevant to the person who's reading it, and they can resonate with that and get enrolled in what you're up to and what you're creating, that's the power of like communicating to your audience. So I would encourage lots of stories.
Yeah, no, that's all, it sounds great. Thank you.
Awesome. So let me see, there's a couple other questions. David, I'm an upright bass player and composer working with solo performing and use of electronics. I'm currently working with local semi-pro gigs, but I'm gathering input and allowing space for my next inspiration to build a stronger income stream out of my playing and exploration of music. Oh, thanks. I will, I'll add you to my email list, and also you can sign up. If you sign up for that on that list, you'll get added there. So just so you know, the link.
So Tracy,
yeah.
some people are just telling us where they're from because I asked that question.
Oh.
So sorry to pollute your stream of questions,
Oh, no,
but
that's okay.
I can take you back to a couple of them.
Oh yeah, sure.
Jeremy asks, do you have any advice for managing email lists? Do you need to use MailChimp or other such services?
Yeah, I would recommend MailChimp or another one of those kind of services for sure, because that's really how you get permission to email people. So MailChimp is decently easy to use. I've heard better things about the one called ConvertKit. So I would check out both, but I've also heard that ConvertKit is a little confusing as well. So, kind of check out the platforms before you really invest, like find out some things about them, because you can do MailChimp for free. But then if you want to start doing some other things with the list, like segmenting and sending automated emails, then you have to pay a monthly fee. So.
And just one thing about the email lists is that there's actually a legal requirement that you get people's permission to email them. And at the bottom of every MailChimp email that goes out, there's an unsubscribe button, which makes it okay for you to be doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so even if I manually enter somebody's name, I have to click that they gave me permission. So yeah, you always have to ask permission if you enter manually, or by signing up themselves, they're essentially giving you permission. But yes, you're right. There's that unsubscribe, which is really nice. Easier for them.
Which is a good segue that we'll be sending out an email after this to everybody who registered with a link to the video, and also any links that Tracy has provided. So we'll send you a link to her mailing list, and we'll put you on ours. And if you don't want to be there, you can use that handy unsubscribe function at the bottom. But we hope you will want to be there, because we're excited to be able to do things like this with Tracy. So
thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tracy. Let's have a big round of applause for Tracy. And thanks to everybody who joined us. Super excited to have you all here. If you're able to make a donation, we would be super happy. Any amount is a big help, and it helps us to know that what we're doing is important for you. And we hope that you join us next week for Matt Heimovitz and Lisa Bialava. And I know that Tracy is going to be really happy to hear from you individually if this has been helpful for you. If you're interested in working with her, she's really easy to find and a great correspondent. She's really excited about what you're all up to. So please do drop her a line. Come back, visit us, and thanks again, Tracy.
Thanks so much. I had such a good time talking to you guys today.
This was super inspirational and informative. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.